Hello and welcome to another one of our weekly lives. We are in the season of the application for the new cycle for the 2024-2025 application cycle. And I'm really excited to be with you today to talk about today's topic, which is Berkeley Haas, MBA program. And before we get started, as people trickle in and come in and join the session, just wanted to take some time to talk about essentially a few logistics. So first and foremost, on our website, we are updating the new deadlines for the deadlines that have been released for the application, for the new application cycle. So we currently have their, of course, as you may know already, Berkeley Haas has released their deadlines, essay questions. Yale SOM has done the same. Columbia's August entry has also released deadlines. McCombs and UCLA Anderson. So I invite you to go to our website, cadmissions.com, and if you're joining from a desktop, the top banner has the deadlines for the new cycle, so you are always up to date in terms of what's happening in the MBA admission journey, essentially. So with that, I also want to invite anyone who's going through this process and wants to understand where they stack up in terms of their competitiveness for a top 20 business school. We have recently launched a quiz, and the quiz has two parts to it. The first one is a automatic report that comes to your email immediately after you submit the form. And the second part of the quiz is a written report submitted by me, which dives deeper into your experiences, the strengths of your profile, and the weaknesses of your profile, or areas that you need to work on. So I invite you to take the quiz. It takes only a few minutes to do, and it can give you a lot of insight in terms of what areas you need to be mindful of as you start this journey. Next week, we're going to talk about Booth as application. So I invite you to register for that event. There will be event invitation on the screen as well as in the comments, so you can immediately register for that event. So you don't forget, as well as you'll receive a post live recap email that in case you miss it, you will have a replay readily available. From whichever platform you are joining us from, we are always hosting a live event every week. We will be having another special event coming on the 18th, and we'll be sharing more on that in the next coming days. We have some students, a particular student from Wharton join us. So I am really, really excited to share that with you. So sign up, for our newsletter, sign up for our events so that we can really keep you up to date in terms of what we're doing to give you as much information free of charge that will help you with your application process. And if you want to, of course, talk about how we can support you or in this process, in your application journey, I also have consultation calls. They are with me. They're 30 minutes. We talk about your background. We talk about your goals, so your future. We talk about your tests and school selection or school list. And then we, of course, dive into also areas in that need development and look at, can we help you in this process? And if so, is this a mutually, beneficial relationship, of course. So you can register. It's free, 30 minutes with me to have a conversation and talk about ways that we can help your application. So with that, why don't we get started in terms of today's topic, which is Berkeley. And we have a lot to cover because Berkeley is one of those schools that has many questions and a lot of writing. So let's dive right in. Make sure my slides are working. Okay. So we're going to look at the class profile, look at the deadlines, what is their evaluation criteria, and of course the application components. I do invite you to ask questions along the way in whichever platform you are joining from. This way I can stop and answer directly questions, so it becomes more of a conversation as opposed to, me giving a speech and then you ask questions afterwards. So please, in whichever platform you are joining us from, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, just write your questions in the comments. We won't show your name on the screen, so don't worry, we will keep anonymity on that front. So as far as the numbers are concerned, Berkeley Haas has a very small class, so 244 students in the MBA class at Berkeley. Their average GPA is 3.64, average GMAT, this is the classic edition, so classic score, it's 733. GRE is 161 verbal and 163 quant, so very competitive in terms of what they're looking for, the average class. And they have an acceptance rate of about 20%. It's important to know that because this is the barometer in terms of how you evaluate your profile compared to the average class. So if you're an overrepresented applicant, these are the minimums, right? Overrepresented, you'll also need a pretty much stronger GMAT score or GRE score than the average class because you are in an overrepresented body of applicants. So this can really help you determine how competitive you are just on numbers. This does not mean that you get in or you don't get in if you don't match this. However, it's just showing you competitiveness, right? And then obviously the rest of your story and how you match the values of Berkeley Haas will better determine if you're competitive or not. The deadlines, so there are two different ways that you can apply to Berkeley Haas. One is through the application portal, through their platform, and then the other one is through the consortium. Consortium has its own deadlines it's a singular deadline for every school that is a member of the consortium. So October 15th for every school that's a member of consortium, that's the deadline. If you apply through that platform, and January 5th is round 2 deadlines. If you are applying directly to Berkeley Haas, then it's September 12th is the round 1, round 2 is January 9th, and April 3rd is round 3. If you're an international applicant, your best bet is to apply in round 1 or round 2. Round 3 with visa and all sorts of complications that can happen make it difficult in terms of being able to join the class at that point. So be really mindful in terms of when you target your applications. So what is their evaluation criteria? They really tell us what they want. So they base everything on these defining leadership principles, and they are famous in terms of Berkeley Haas, which is questioning the status quo. This does not mean that you are someone who is just challenging the status quo for no reason, but rather you are thinking innovatively and you are challenging conventional ways of doing things if there are better ways to do things, right? And this is what they look for in applicants. This is what the successful students at Berkeley Haas embody. So they are really looking to cultivate that very small class that matches the values of Berkeley. The second defining leadership principle is confidence without attitude. This is essentially, one of the notorious things about Berkeley is how humble everyone is on campus. So the community is there, which is really wonderful because you have very intelligent individuals, yet everyone is sort of down to earth. So their perspective is that you need to base decisions on data, right? And that gives you the confidence to be humble. You don't need, arrogance to prove your point. You are basing your decisions on the data and your research that you are, or critical thinking in terms of like how are you thinking about a problem and how you're solving it. Student always, this means that you are someone who is always curious to learn more, to gain new perspectives, to be in communities of individuals who have these different perspectives. You have to demonstrate these things, right? All of these defining leadership principles. You may not necessarily resonate with all of them in terms of your day-to-day, but you do need to embody these principles in order to be successful at converting an application to an offer of admission at Berkeley. And then beyond yourself, it's really you are someone who is looking at the work that you do, not just for your own benefit, but for the collective good. And you again need to demonstrate that through the various components of the application itself. I will say you can either take a screenshot of this slide with the defining leadership principles, or just go to Berkeley Haas website. They are already there, and have that on a post-it note, laminated or something that will remind you who it is that you are communicating to in terms of the admission team, right? This is what they're looking for in your application, and you need to make sure that you are capturing this throughout the different components, the different places they let you share your story, and you leverage it obviously to be able to also communicate these elements. Now, I will say, just don't fall in the trap of trying to match this and therefore you're being inauthentic yourself. Authenticity is table stakes. This is essentially where you weave their principles, or really just like look at what your experiences have been and present your story with these defining leadership principles in mind as you are sharing your genuine experiences that you've had. So how do you approach these characteristics? How do you embody this character in your application? And we'll talk now more about those in just a minute. But the first thing that you have to do, if you have done nothing yet, and I know that every day now we'll be receiving emails, and you'll see it. You'll see the deadlines have been released for every school. You should start. Your first step is to reflect on your experiences, reflect on who you are, reflect on what matters to you. This will help capture your authentic self, while also, of course, taking into account what schools are looking for. But this comes as secondary. What schools are looking for is secondary. You first have to know yourself, right? So reflection is really, really important in this process. And it's continuous, of course, as you go through the writing elements in the interview preparation. But you have to start first, defining who you are. So what the application components of Berkeley Haas, and I've only gone here through the application submission, not necessarily interview. I didn't include the interview components here. Just so you know, the interviews are by invitation only, and they're relatively standard in terms of what they're looking for, but you still have to embody the defining leadership principles that I mentioned earlier, even in the interview. But the application, it's actually quite extensive. You have a lot of space with a lot of words to put together a strong Berkeley Haas application. So first and foremost, obviously you need your education, you need your transcripts ready. Make sure that you have official transcripts that you are sharing with the school, and your test scores need to be shared with the school as well. Personal information, so obviously your address and that kind of data points, but also activities and achievements and awards. All of these are parts of the application process. Just know that Berkeley has a lot of space for you to develop your story, to share your story in the application portal. So it's not a 100-character response. sometimes there's no limit in terms of like how much space you can use to share what you want to share, which means if you write too short, they're going to wonder, why did you write only very little in terms of answering that particular question when you have the space? So you really want to strike the balance in terms of not inundating the admission team, but also providing enough context that it allows them to see who you are and what you can contribute to the community. You have the professional experiences. Of course, they'll ask you about your jobs, your achievements, those components. They're actually the job description and segment of your application portal. At least last year. We'll see what once the application portal opens this year. But it used to be not having any limitation in words, so you really had a chance to capture who you are. And no, you do not copy and paste the resume. They already have the resume. This is about sharing additional information with them. Then, of course, you include a one-page resume if you have less than 10 years of work experience. 2-page resume if you have more than 10 years of work experience. That's the general rule in terms of resumes. Even if you have more than, so even if you have 1 to 2 page space, right, to submit, do make sure that you follow those principles because those are just the standards, the expectations. They have 2 letters of recommendation that are required for the application, and then the essays. So let's go into the letters of recommendation and essays, because these are the things that take the longest in terms of preparation. And not to say that the others don't, but you have a little bit more time with those. So they require 2 letters of recommendation, and they follow the GMAT common letter recommendation questions, which is how do you compare to other well-qualified individuals in a similar role, and tell us about a time you gave the applicant constructive feedback. Collectively, those 2 questions, the recommenders have 1,000 words to respond, 500 for each, essentially. But then they also have another question, which is describing the interactions the recommender has with you, the applicant. And they have 500 words to talk about that. So collectively, for Berkeley Haas, the recommenders have 1,500 words to respond in terms of to capture you and to capture what you bring to the table. This is a lot of work, right? And I strongly encourage you to communicate with your recommenders in terms of what you want them to say, what experiences you would like for them to share, and just guide them what the business school is looking for. Unless they have personally attended Berkeley Haas, they may not know those nuances. So it's really, really important that you are working with the recommender who is willing to help you in this application process, and do it as early as possible, because most of you are applying to more than one school, typically about 5 or 6, right? And each one of them has its own unique needs, unique requirements, and you want to make sure you give your recommender as much time as possible to put together these materials, because of course they have their own life, their own responsibilities, and they're doing this because they believe in you and they believe in your future potential. Essays, we have 3 written essays that are required. So essay 1, this is the very famous Berkeley Haas question, which is what makes you feel alive when you're doing it and why? This question is really what at the core of this question is getting to know you and your motivations. Not motivations for your goals, because there is a goals question, so you don't need to go into goals. But this is about how you show up, what makes you motivated when you are in community. And, you can go in a variety of different ways. You can talk about how you like helping people. You can talk about how you like being innovative. You can talk about whatever it is that makes you feel alive. But typically, this is a challenging question to write. It will take time to actually put it together. And although it's 300 words, that is the final draft. Typically, you're going to start with 500-600 word response that you then narrow down and are concise by the final output. But you do need to capture this what makes you feel alive question effectively. This does allow you the opportunity to go back to those defining leadership principles and really capture how you resonate with those through this particular example without necessarily referencing them. Second question is, what are your short and long-term career goals, and how will an MBA from Haas help you achieve those goals? 300 words to respond to this question. It's really important that you are able to capture, obviously you need to write your goals. You need to write your short and long-term goals. They should not be vague. There should not be twists and turns to your goals. It should be very clear, very concise, very much pragmatic in terms of feasibility is concerned. And then you need to do your research in terms of what is Berkeley Haas going to give you that is uniquely at Berkeley Haas that you want to leverage in terms of helping you get to your goals faster. And I say faster, it's because you need to, of course, recognize that an MBA is a tool for you to get to where you want to go faster, and it's not the only way, right? So making that recognition, of course, is really important, because if you build this short and long-term goal that is, the movements are very slow, right, between where you are now and where you want to go, then the admission team may question if you even need an MBA for that, right? So very important to keep in mind. Essay 3 is describe any experience or exposure you've had in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, justice, and belonging, whether through community, organizations, personal, or in the workplace. Reflection. I'm not sure how else to talk about this. That you need to look at where have you had an opportunity to demonstrate or to be exposed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, justice, and belonging. Or it doesn't need to be all of those. And you need to be able to capture your involvement. Also, there needs to be an outcome. Remember that you are demonstrating to the admission committee that you are future potential leader that will be successful. Therefore, your essays, your material that you're including in here, the assumption is that you're going to be successful, and you were successful. So it's not just about, I was exposed to these experiences and we didn't have success. So reflecting on where you had these opportunities to be a part of diversity, equity, inclusion. What did you do? Because at the end also it's about you, not about anyone else, not about how your boss, did this or that, and you are an observer. You really need to be an active participant, and you need to have made some kind of influence, some kind of impact in that experience itself. Essays. So continuation on essay. Last year, Berkeley Haas did announce a video essay, and they're continuing it this year as well. The video essay is, you get the question, right? You get to respond in 1 to 2 minute video response. I do suggest that you write at least bullet points in terms of what you want to capture. But you can go in more details, obviously, to be comfortable in front of a camera. This is, you're demonstrating who you are, not just in terms of what you say, but also how you present yourself in front of the camera, how you are going to show up in, a video platform. It does need to be essentially thought out, and that's the expectation, because they have given you the question in advance. Kellogg has the video essays that are through Kira. You don't get the questions in advance, so you are kind of ad-libbing it on the spot. They are giving you the question, they're giving you instructions, what they want you to say. Make sure that you answer fully the question, which is briefly introduce yourself to the admission committee, explain which defining leadership principle resonates most with you, and tell us how you have exemplified the principles in your personal or professional life. Here, they're specifically asking you to showcase your defining leadership principles that resonates with you. Just make sure that you're mapping your Berkeley Haas application in terms of what stories go where, so you're not repeating yourself. Obviously, you're still maintaining the defining leadership principle in mind with everything that you include for Berkeley. But here you are going to literally mention one of the four, right? And you're going to then find an example in your personal or professional life. I personally prefer professional, but of course, sometimes it's not always so black and white. And I would then talk about that. You have up to 2 minutes. Your video, your final product that you are submitting in the application portal is to be up to 2 minutes in terms of length. So use it, right? Use it to make sure that you are really capturing what you want to say, because you have two parts. There are two parts to this. One is introducing yourself, and the second one is identifying the principle. Actually, three parts. Identifying the principle is the second. Defining leadership principle is the second part, and the third part is using an example to illustrate how you embody this, right? So it needs to be, all those pieces need to be answered before you submit that video. And you also need to have to make sure that you are showing yourself in an authentic way, like the body language needs to be there as well. Especially because you've been given this in advance to do, right? So keep that in mind. And finally, as we are approaching the end, so write your questions that you have in the comments. Let me see, are there any questions actually? Oops. Yes, write your questions in the comments so I have a chance to stop and answer them as we approach the end of our session. But the final component of the application process, and this final in terms of not elements that are in the application portal, the short answer questions, right? There's more pieces of writing in terms of Berkeley. But the final, essentially final essay writing is the optional essays. They are optional. I only consider one to be optional, by the way. So the first one is, we invite you to help us better understand the context of your opportunities and achievements. This is where you have a chance to actually share your more personal experiences, more personal life. Not everyone has the opportunities in the same way, right? If you come from a background where perhaps you're a first-generation college student and you had to learn the journey that led you to where you are today, and you may be sort of on the same level as the other applicants that are applying, but your journey to get to that same level was much more difficult, right? And therefore, by sharing this information with the admission team, it does help them understand those contexts, because then it's like your achievement, your hill was much steeper to climb than someone else's who had obviously more opportunities, was in a community of people who were able to help them along the way, right? So make sure that you are really being vulnerable from that perspective, not in terms of woe is me, but in terms of just being factual of what your experience, what your upbringing was like, what the opportunities were like. So this one, I don't really consider it an optional, unless anything you say, it's gonna, not necessarily help your application. The second one, this one is optional. So this is where you include any information that you were not able to share elsewhere. So if there's gaps in employment, if you didn't perform well academically, if there are supplemental courses, if there is anything that may be questionable in terms of your application, so like the GMAT or the GRE, you have an opportunity to do so in this optional essay, or to address it in this optional essay. So a lot of work to do between now and September, but it's totally doable in terms of being able to put all these materials together if you have a plan and there is consistent forward action. So that's your first homework in terms of after this session, if you are, of course, planning to apply to Berkeley Haas. So keeping in mind the defining leadership principles that I mentioned earlier, you can go back and rewatch that section and also just screenshot the pieces that are associated with the defining leadership principles. Keep that in mind at every time when you write your essays. After you write your essays, go back to those leadership principles and ask yourself, or even ask someone who's giving you feedback, does this response weave any one of these defining leadership principles that will help you elevate your essay writing. These essays are all about you at the end of the day. Even if you're talking about other people, it's really important for you to keep in mind that they are, at the end of the day, a reflection of you, because the admission team does not necessarily care about the other people, the other protagonists in your story. You are the main character. You are the focus. And then, of course, always, as with every school, keep in mind the 3 C's: compelling, clear, and concise. This is not about using fancy words. It's really about being clear, being concise in a way that the reader can fully understand. There's no guesswork associated with it. It's crystal clear, essentially, what you're trying to communicate. And this is not something that typically comes very quickly. It's something you need time to reflect, to craft, edit, polish, and so on and so forth. So with that, I think we've come to an end. I didn't get a chance to answer questions, but if you have questions after this, I will monitor this video on YouTube. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, comment on this video, and we'll be answering questions that come in through the video. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week when we talk about the Booth MBA application process.